Hello everyone and welcome to SPA 25. My name is Teng Teng and this is Sana, and we're both from the youth editorial board of SPA 25 in SPE, and we both organize and will moderate this panel of tonight. I would like to start this evening with a thank you to Young Collector Circle and of course for the 4 speakers who joined us this evening. What a special evening to have a panel. I wish you all a very abundant, healthy, and joyous Lunar New Year. As it represents the celebration of togetherness and family tonight, it's truly heartwarming to see so many beautiful people showing up this evening, and I'm especially very grateful to see that both of our families are here with us tonight. We are stepping into the year of the wooden snake. It's a year that combines the snake's intuitive and strategic nature with the collaborative and nurturing qualities of wood. It's a year that invites a unique energy of balance and exploration. In the book of Genesis, snakes have long been associated with evil and temptation. However, in Chinese culture, snakes have a way more complex and varied symbolism. They are known for the ability to shed their skin and renew themselves, symbolizing transformation and rebirth. And this whole notion of transformation and rebirth offers us an opportunity to reflect. How can we make more responsible choices for our planet? How can we nurture those around us? And how can we leave habits and structures that no longer serve us? Tonight, we're here to shed the skin of the art world. And Asana and I have often questioned, what are we actually trying to break into? For whom were these spaces made and was granted access? How can we transform into a nurturant ecosystem that cares about solidarity and inclusivity? These personal and systemic barriers can often feel hopeless and endless, but they're not unbreakable. A path forward can always be found, and we can mend what is broken and restore what has been lost or forgotten. So, with the strategic and nurturing qualities of the wooden snake guiding us tonight, I would like to delve right into the heart of tonight's discussion, and I will let Sana do the honor of introducing our panel of tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this beautiful introduction. We have 4 speakers with us tonight. Sepp Eckenhausen, he's an art researcher and organizer. Currently, he works at the Institute of Network Cultures and at CARAT, which is the Center for Applied Research for Art, Design and Technology. This is where he runs the research program Our Creative Reset and co-hosts the podcast Art in Permacrisis. He focuses on visual art, digital culture, activism, tactical media and new economies. For a few years, he also co-directed Platform BK, which is an organization dedicated to examining the role of art in society and also campaigning for better art policies. Leah Amerding is a curator, producer and moderator, and she is part of Young OSCAM, which is a traineeship program for which she has curated multiple exhibitions. Her work focuses mainly on visual culture, race theory and the contemporary art markets across the African continent. Then we have Christa Maria Lermhees. She's a professor of modern and contemporary art here at the University of Amsterdam. This is also where she recently directed the Amsterdam School for Heritage, Memory and Visual Culture, Material Culture. Her research focuses on social art practices, artistic research and word and image studies, but also on visual legacies of Irish writers, performance art, the historiography of art and curation. And then finally, we have Ai Wen Yin, who is an artist, designer, researcher, and also an institutional strategist. She builds on the idea that technology and institutions are deeply interconnected and also rethinks and reimagines our socio-economic, cultural, emotional, and bodily conditions by designing a new approach to the institutional and the technical that centers around the notion of care ethics. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. After our conversation, we will delve into, we will invite Nadine van den Bos, who is the co-director of the Young Collectors Circle, to the stage, and she will give a masterclass on, she will provide tools on how to navigate this art world and this ecosystem. But now let's dive into the conversation and start peeling back the layers of the art world. We will first identify the systemic and the structural barriers that are at play, and then we will examine what these can mean for the individual. And then we will conclude together by reimagining solutions and reimagining an alternative art ecosystem. So let's get started. We thought it would be a good idea to start where it all begins, education. Both Teng Teng and I have gone through a very different trajectory, one starting from a more academic background and one from a more practical one. And we both saw the solitude of our curriculum. Both of us really encountered this barrier between theory and practice, but from a different point of view. So Mia, as a professor and a curator, you supervise art researchers and students. We wanted to first ask you, what do you think are the consequences of this barrier between the practical and the theoretical?
Yeah, thanks very much, first for the invitation and then also for the question. There is a rather large divergence between the theoretical or historical way of educating people who want to end up in the art ecosystem and practice in art schools, academies in the Netherlands. In other places it's not quite as pronounced. I used to teach in a university in the UK system where artists and academics in various fields were in the same institution. So I was used to having full professors who were artists work alongside me as an art historian and curator. And while people would take different kinds of modules and would focus on different things, the disparity between a kind of a canonical art historical program and something that is much more focused on the making and the presence isn't as pronounced. So it's really different where you are. But that disparity here leads to people needing to envision a little bit more imaginatively, I suppose, how one can bridge these gaps. And I think there are many, or all of the people here in the front who are taking active steps to make us a little bit, talk to each other a little bit more and bridge these gaps so that we can envision an art world that that includes all of us, because we all have, because of our different educational programs, different contributions to make. And these are all valid and valuable. So there isn't really one art world that we all kind of gear or path towards. We can, I think you already mentioned the ecosystem idea. We can think of the needs of society, the needs of art practices, institutions, and try to complement what there isn't already.
Thank you very much. Oh yeah. So, as an educator, how do you help students bridge then this gap between practice and theory? Because you have experience in the UK system, but How do you approach this here in the Netherlands then?
Yeah, also here, we don't just educate art historians who will continue to be art historians and write catalogue essays or something like that. We also have curators who take our program, curating art and cultures. We have artistic researchers in a great variety of practices who also seek out the depth of theory and knowledge in the various realms that their research questions pertain to, research questions that they investigate through both theory and practice. And then there are so many different kinds of paths that lie in between all things, and that I curate exhibitions every now and then I wouldn't want to miss. So I don't just stand in a classroom and tell them what Duchamp's work was all about or something like that. I make my networks work for others. I say, okay, you with your thesis idea, you could take an internship there where they're working on the kinds of interests that you have also. Bring people together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mia, for this answer. I think it's really beautiful how you kind of sketch this navigation, how we can combine practice and theory. But yeah, we do see this current curriculum that it does not prepare students to does not prepare students for the field. And I think we can all know this daunting moment when you receive your certificate and you question, and what now? Do I have to sell my soul for a job? And Sepp, I would like to ask you, because you have researched this precarious state of the economic structure in this neoliberal capitalistic art world. And I was wondering if you could kind of explain how this culture around unpaid labor, but also emotional unpaid labor, influences cultural and artistic workers.
Right, thank you. Where to begin? Maybe by acknowledging that probably we all feel this, right? Even in our bodies and our brains, we feel the pressure, we feel the insecurity, we feel the workload, we feel this like not knowing where we're welcome and when, if we're wanted or not, if we can pay the next rent or not. These are very real questions that are also, I guess, if we start taking a step back, the outcomes of structural issues, we might call it neoliberalism, even though in some cases maybe that's not even enough anymore. But okay, if we understand neoliberalism as the marketization of every dimension of life, that means that everything that used to be public goods become more and more marketized. It also means that governments start less focusing on taking care of common goods and regulating and restricting markets, and more start stimulating and following markets, which we can very clearly see in the arts and culture field. In the case of, for instance, if you look at numbers of freelancers in the arts, we have, in visual arts, it's estimated that we have 90% of us freelancers, as opposed to 70% in the cultural field at large, and about 30 to 40% in the general labor working population. So we are, in some, to some extent, the flex work avant-garde of this country. So that's just one dimension. You can also see it in funding, that private funding is more and more indicating or taking initiative where public funding is following. So these are different kinds of structural elements that kind of define the economic position of artists and other art workers. And then, of course, we have other kinds of like racism, sexism. We know that only 8 or 9% of artists in the UK identifies as working class. We don't know these numbers for the Netherlands, but it's very low as opposed to 20 or 30% in the general population. We know in Belgium that 50%, more than 50% of the art students is female, whereas if you look at 5 or 10 years after graduation, around 5 to 10% of public funding goes to female artists. So there's all these kind of structural issues that are actually influencing and defining how we feel in this room, probably. Yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg, maybe giving some points of connection.
Yeah, indeed. I also thought about the curriculum and how this lack of knowledge, for example, with the Fair Play Practice Code or guidelines that we don't really know about, and that also kind of influence our economic decisions that we make after. So the role or lack of money causes problems, especially when you are fully dependent on these external institutions. And also when in 2024, many Dutch cultural institutions lost a lot of funding overnight, which left them even in a more precarious position. And I wanted to ask you, because you also did a lot of research on the European funding model, what structural barriers do you think artists and cultural practitioners encounter in this current?
Thank you. So just to fill in, the European funding model is a term that I coined for just like to describe a kind of systematic tendency that so that the whole funding culture started with policymaker picking up certain social trend, let's say, to believe what's the role of culture and specifically art should play in the society, and then they design different kind of policy, incentive, and then philanthropies or fundings. They will pick up that idea, that kind of instrument, create different kind of grant programs, and then institutions who get granted will be starting to pick up different kind of artists to sort of make certain kind of commission that should supposedly responding to that vague idea. And then the artists supposedly should be engaging with the larger society and bringing the creative quote-unquote solution to the society, and then therefore changing the whole way that people think, engage with the society and each other, so that eventually we have a better society. So that's like the total wet dream of policymakers. That doesn't really work, because on the other hand, we also have the art economy that sort of works in its own kind of self-enclosed kind of logic, that art economy is about bringing artists to certain kind of shows and then demonstrating certain ideas. So the engagement with the public is largely a gesture other than really a long-term commitment, let's say. And so it's not that not curator, which I believe you will bring up later, and institutions, and I even know a lot of funders that are trying to do things differently. And then we will have to confront with another thing, is that when we think about artists are trying to instigate social movement or trying to create socially engaged art and creating community, etc., like the art world doesn't really create any much of incentive for them to stay put, right? So eventually they have to go for the activist kind of thing. Is like I put in all my time, efforts, and energy to just do something that I don't know whether it will come in return or not. And in the same time that these funders, institutions who are trying to support, ironically, because we don't know, and also communities, they also don't know what they are, right? What is a community more than just a group of people coming together? And so by sketching out all this kind of European funding model and imagining the alternative, we realize we have to first understand what a community is. So then me and my collaborators sort of developed this model. We sort of call it community astrology. But it's actually more like trying to describe the ontology of community, where you have community don't only just need money to sustain themselves, but also space where they can come together and also host other people, and relationship whether you can have supportive relationship or cultivating relationship with larger public, and how do you take care of each other? How do you explore money beyond just the standard economy? And how do you implement or explore your ideology in an organizational and alliances kind of way? So we now starting to work with funders and philanthropists that trying to look at how do you support this kind of community more than just giving them a grant or a space, but rather we look at how do you systematically cultivate or sustain the imagination of a community, the passion of a community, how to help them to retain their intention, even though the larger economy and social environment has been radically shifted. And then how do they along the line actually maintain their value? And how do they develop their infrastructure? How do they kind of engage the transformation they want to have? How do they actually realize their own ambition? So from solidarity to practice, how does all this we create this kind of model that trying to work with institutions and funders to create different kind of policy guidelines and supporting policies and stuff. So that's my art. I was, that's all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for this beautiful model. Is it on? Yeah. For sharing this. Speaking of community, as we are Spout 25 in SPE, we really acknowledge the importance of a community where like-minded peers together challenge the status quo. So we were wondering, Lea, since you are a young producer and young curator at OSCAM, how do sort of maybe some of these or all of these structural issues that we talked about, how do these influence your practice? And what do you find very important with your contribution at Young OSCAM?
Well, great question. I think the first thing that came to mind when I saw this, because we were given a certain idea of what we were going to talk about today, the first thing that came to mind was funding. That's always the biggest problem within the art sector, and more specifically in the creative sector, is how can you make these ideas, these productions, how can you curate, how can you create when you don't have any money? And one thing that I know about the creative sector, and when you're not in these big institutions, and even in these big institutions, is sometimes you have to be scrappy. You have to be able to do and work with literally your two hands. You've got to get down and do the work. One thing that I really appreciate about OSCAM, which is, for some of you who don't know, OSCAM is it's a museum in the Bijlmer. It stands for the Open Space Contemporary Art Museum. We've been open since 2017, and we try to showcase talent that you wouldn't see in a conventional art, or more specifically Dutch institution. And so the work that we're showcasing is made for the people who come to visit, the demographic that we're trying to cater to. But one thing is, because we are a small institution, we have to be scrappy. And it means that within my team, I take on the hat of producer, and I take on that. If I'm a curator, sometimes I'm a producer. And sometimes I'm also the person who is nailing stuff onto the wall, who's hanging up the art pieces. I'm also the person who is sometimes going to go buy paint for the person to paint the walls. It's not because there's not enough people to work. It's just there's not enough money to pay everybody. The other thing that also comes in within our structure and that we struggle with is also time. A lot of times, as we were talking about trends, these cultural trends, and you want to be in the know and you want to keep up with those trends, but at the same time, you want to be true to the institution that you are and the people that you're trying to create for. And a lot of the times we don't have time. I'm part of this group that's called the Young OSCAM team, and we come up with exhibitions every 2-3 months. and we're trying to showcase work and artists who are having their first solo exhibition. And it doesn't mean that it's like lower quality because of that. It actually showcases that it's possible to create something in such a short period of time and to make a production in such a short period of time. But I've spoken to other creatives in other museums, whether that be here in the Netherlands or outside, who speak about how it's always a question of time, that there's not enough time to sit with the material that you're talking about, you know, like, and that's one thing that I admire about academia, is that there is that time to sit, you know. I do. Maybe I might be completely wrong. I've been out of academia for a little bit, so. But I sometimes feel like there's wonderful art and beautiful artists that we just present for a period of time, and then you just have to move on to the next. One opening happens, and then literally 2 weeks later, you're thinking about the next opening. But it's not to say that I'm not grateful to be in those spaces. It just means that you just have to be quick and scrappy. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. I heard you laughing, and I saw you nodding during the answer.
I think our experience is much closer than you think. Yeah. Around the corner here in the library building that we're going to divest very shortly because we're getting a new library. There is the Doelezaal where we have our diploma ceremonies and so on. And I'm part of a group that I've myself founded, actually, Kunstcommissie, Art Committee of the university. We do that all for the love of it, and obviously not because we get any hours or whatever for it, but we consider the university as a place that is a cultural institution because we look at it with open eyes, and we want our institution to look like we mean it, right? So in the Doelezaal, I made a tiny little documentary exhibition about Ilya and Emilia Kabakov's The Old Reading Room installation, big installation by big artists, 1999, and it must have cost a fortune, and nobody knew about it. I was here for 10 years and I didn't know about it, so I needed to make this little documentation, totally scrappy. Absolutely, you can walk in there, it's really scrappy, and of course everybody puts their old tables in front of it. Nobody recognizes it as an exhibition. But it needed to be done so that the university would see itself having had that vision and that money in the past.
Can I build on what she was saying? I think the thing that you're touching on is the idea that it has to happen. Yeah. This idea that you have to tell those stories regardless and no matter how. And it's not to say like doing it in a way that's like, oh, it's badly presented and it's not worked on. But it's truly that, okay, this is important and this needs to happen. And sometimes, and as you said, like sometimes there's no hours for that. And sometimes, or like you're a freelancer and that's the structure that it is. So you don't have a contract and they've given you, let's say 40 hours and you go up to 56 or you go up to 60. And in some situations, I'm very fortunate to be in an institution that pays me for the work that I do, that every time I show up, I'm getting paid for that. But a lot of people work in the art sector, work in these institutions, whether that be museums, galleries, and things like that, and they don't get paid. They don't get, their work isn't recognized in that way. And even though the stories that they're saying have to be told, and they are appreciated by the cultural sector, and they are appreciated by the visitors and the people who are coming. People are like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe this is told, but they don't know the almost like free labor that has gone behind it, the emotional, the physical, the financial labor that's gone into it. And it's almost like a sacrifice that you have to make in order to have those stories told.
Yeah, and Ivan, what you were showing us here is so pertinent to it. The infrastructural focus that you have and the focus on solidarity, that is precisely what people who end up working in this cultural field end up focusing on. It's not a beautiful art object, a kind of a talisman that we place on that nail in the wall and that does all the work by itself. It's the networks of people who do things together, who make these infrastructures visible, who make the absence of money visible, and who will, in this country also, have to be much more inventive in the future than in the past. Because, just to look up there and think, oh, the money is going to drop down or something like that, it's not going to happen anymore. Yeah?
If I can build up on that, I kind of want to maybe refer to this one. It's actually called like self-realization. Like we make this hypothesis of like each collective, actually in a lot of socially driven artists and individuals, like really joining this kind of movement out of a kind of self-realization and kind of wish to kind of address social justice, but also secretly want to have some personal nurturing in that, right? Because that's why we have like the last kind of actually it's called healing. The healing of the individual themselves, where we come into this kind of social mission because we feel either isolated or discontent with our environment, etc. We're trying to find a social enclave to kind of work on the alternative of things, and that actually like have embedded a kind of personal motive that I want something that is good for me and good for the society. And however, both of you talking about the lack of like financial compensation, the kind of even lack of visibility of it, quite often becomes this like the labor end of it, when you think that if you do a lot more and then things going to change, but actually it can kind of competing your need of healing as well, because when the stress of production is in direct confrontation with the need of self-growth and healing. Because in self-growth, you need to give time to learn, to cultivate, to nurture each other. And if you rush in every 2 weeks to just think about the next program, how are you going to have time to kind of contemplate and feel what you actually been through in this whole time, right? So I think that's also where we're trying to work with some funders to really think about, like, how do you give time for people to rest and heal? And throughout that kind of process, could that be considered as part of the work, right? And then how do we like open up to talk about how do we fail, how do we feel exhausted, and then, but not in a way that just like showcasing all our frustration, but really talk about like that's what it costs to transgress, that's what it costs to find social justice, and every bit that happen in between of those moments should be having space to talk about, and then should have the opportunity to be seen, right? So that would be something I'm trying to build up.
I think we have come to an understanding of how artists and cultural practitioners are not only affected by the financial precarity, but also the lack of knowledge of how to take care of each other. And after setting up this program, we both also reflected on our title, Access Granted, Breaking In and Breaking Down the Art World, because maybe it's whether about envisioning an alternative art world and actually seize the act of breaking in entirely. But to do that, we need to envision alternative economies as well. And Sepp, how would you envision an alternative, sustainable art economy?
Okay, another big one. Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll take some strength in realizing I'm really not alone in this question, and this kind of sentiment, right? Like let's just burn the museum down and let's just move on, right? I hear this so much around me now, and even though I get it, I don't necessarily think this is the way forward, because then what you very quickly see is after people say let's abolish the institution altogether. And if you're an institution, if you're working in an institution, you're the part of the problem, right? Like this kind of sentiment. Even the people who have this kind of sentiment most often will then start rebuilding their own institutions or their own institutional infrastructures. So I think it's also quite brave to say in this kind of time, but what are the institutions that we want to fight for, and what are the institutions that can actually make a difference, and where we can support what is being done and where we can be supported. Not to say that we should not be highly critical of institutions being silent about genocide, complicit in extractivism, and so on. Anyway, just to put this out there, I'm not on the total abolitionist side of the institutional question, but then the question of the more economically sustainable infrastructure, institutional system, or labor market, there are so many ideas going around that often are kind of opposed to the art market as it functions, right? And maybe it's also then important to say, like, the sacrifice that you were talking about, it's like sometimes we think that the art market is not where we are, or that we are not where the art market is, but actually people are benefiting off of this kind of free labor that we're producing. So much money is being made in the art, maybe just not by us. And we are part of this production, this value production chain, even in our little corner, creating cultural values. So it's about turning this around. That's the question, right? And there's many people who try to think of alternative systems, repairing the system as it is. I mean, fair practice is an idea that has been going around the Dutch arts and European arts worlds for a long time, and that has actually significantly changed the way that money is distributed, even though I think it's also limited in some ways. But there's other ideas like basic income, commoning, that Ivan has been working on a lot, I know, and people put their trust in like the digital dumb money of the Web3 kind of sphere. Other people believe more that we should do work in co-ops, or you should organize better in unions and make stronger demands. And I think it's not a matter of finding the solution. It's a matter of engaging in as many experiments and pushing them as far as we can.
All of the above and more, actually. There's so many ideas that Gregory Gillette writes about dark matter art, yeah? All the pre-failed artists that go through academies and so on end up supporting the tip of the iceberg, the few blue chip galleries and their selected few male, usually, artists. And then some people work in institutions, in museums, and make whatever little money there is go far for others. And so experimental institutional strategies, Charles Escher would be somebody from the Van Abbe Museum who's coined that one. And Documenta 15 in 2022 in Kassel, where so many civil society actors, social rights, human rights activists and artists from all over the world were brought together in order to establish further networks, compare notes on methods, and make that kind of a sector stronger through working together. So if we learn all of that in universities as well, we can actually take a little step further and make the resources that our time, our students' time, our audience's time constitute, make those resources work.
Maybe I can add a kind of like self-critical points that I think also, especially in the art I mentioned earlier, that art ecosystem is its own self-enclosing system. And we really much like have a hard time to make friends outside of that circles, right? And it of course has a more systematic problem of like we are in a highly specified like a disciplined society. So academia, no academia, stuff, not much else, right? And at the same time, artists is the same. So that's also when we have funding cuts, we also feel like we are just like the domino effects, like we have nothing else to relying on. And so we also kind of trying to make that kind of theory, like you might see there's this one part that calls wetland as like relationship with the outside world. Like how do you like make sure you kind of starting to expand different kind of relationship outside of your own little circles, and then basically just like a theory of distributing risk. how do you make alliances and trying to able to converge different kind of resources together, like within all the airlines, and that will require to imagine different ways of arting, other than just like showing ideas, but like art can be considered as a mode of engagement. Like how do we engage more than just spectatorship? And also just like showcasing like, oh, solidarity, let's act a perfect portrait of solidarity, which also becomes a problem, right? So yeah, there's still a lot of work to do, I would say. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I also really liked what you said about incorporating this in like actually the curriculum at the university. And Leah, I heard you say about this scrappiness that you sometimes have to deal with when curating and all of these issues, but that you also really feel this necessity of telling certain stories. And I think that's something that can be very relatable to many young makers at this moment. I would really like to ask your advice for other young change makers on how to stand their ground and really contribute to this building of alternative futures as you are doing it.
As a person who's in the sector
yeah.
and working in it. Well, I think that's that could be a very easy question, like an easy answer, or it could be like a very complicated, dense, and well-defined one, but I'll try to find something in the middle. I think what I'm trying to recommend to young people who are in the creative sector is, first of all, recognizing that there's a lot of potential in it. It's not simply that you have to be an artist, but there are ways to be in the creative sector and in the art sector that are outside of simply being a person who is the artist, the photographer, the painter, the sculptor, but also a person who is the producer, the curator, the programmer, a person who is participating in this sector and who is contributing to it and making it work. I think oftentimes a lot of people, when they think of the art sector and when they think of the cultural sector, it's like a limited perception of what type of jobs and occupations exist in it. I mean, the other day I was speaking to somebody who works in the New Institute, and they were talking about how they have an entire department that's dedicated towards acquiring visas and moving art pieces from one country to the next. That for me is not even something that I conceptualize. Do you know what I mean? It's not even something that I thought about, because I was like, yeah, okay, the art gets there, but I wasn't really thinking about how is it that we have all of these agreements that are made between states, agreements that are made with the artists, agreements that are made with the institutions. So I think it's first recognizing that there's potential within the institutions that we have, while also being very critical of them, recognizing that they have their flaws and their histories, and that in order to enact change, you have to, unfortunately, be a part of them. I think you internally, you have to kind of be in the matrix. That's my fundamental belief, and we can have a conversation about that later. But the other thing I want to say is also the importance of relying on your community. We keep talking about community, but it's really important to form community with people who have similar beliefs, ideas, and values, but also creating something with that community. When I say creating is, I think that we all have ideas or projects that we want to do, and oftentimes we keep them in our heads and in our minds. We think like, I want to start this, I want to start like a meetup group, or something as simple as I want to start writing a blog, but you don't talk about it with anybody. When you talk about it with your community and the people who are in your lives, they hold you accountable. They check in on it. They say things like, oh, how's that blog going? Or, I know that you wanted to paint. Have you started painting? Or, I know that you wanted to learn more about like the financial sector within the art market. Have you read those articles? Or even something simple like, oh, I heard you wanted to become a freelancer. Did you actually do the paperwork and get into it? One thing that I've known, and your network doesn't have to just be like your family. It could be your friends. It could be a professor that you count on. It could be a colleague that you confide in. Because I think when you start sharing your projects and your ideas, you start realizing that there are people who are there to support it, first of all, and second, there are also people who are there to help you achieve the goals that you want to achieve. The number of times that I've had conversations with people that have then led to quite literally me working at USCOM was because of a conversation. It was because I was in the right time in the right space. And because somebody heard what I cared about and what I was interested in, I ended up in the space that I wanted to be in. Now, I'm not saying that this is the formula for everything. I'm not saying that this is what you have to do to enter into the art space, because I have to point out that I'm very fortunate to be one of the few of my colleagues who works within an institution that's made up of young creatives who get to tell the stories that we care about, that we are interested in, and that we think need to be shared. But I think that there has to be that sense of relying on your community and asking for your community for help. The last thing I want to point out, sorry, I said I only had 2, but I have 3. The last thing is, I think we shouldn't be afraid to create things, to do things, to make things, even if they don't work out, you know? Like, make that collective, that artist collective, that group of writers who make something, and maybe no one's going to read it, and it's just going to be the 3 of you. Or maybe if it's not even 3, it's just 2 people. But that's fine. It just means that at least you've done it and you've created something. And maybe one day along the lines, somewhere in history, who knows, somebody might read it and somebody might see it and somebody might look at it and be inspired by it. I just think that there's a lot of fear around doing things, you know? And I think that it's about just getting up and doing it. That's how I feel.
I really want to add to that is the kind of like the fear of doing things has to do with like the whole notion of art has to be seen, right?
So
yeah, it's a spectatorship kind of like it's like spelling over our heads all the time, and that's why we want to trying to talk about the healing is that like if you do the things that is meaningful for you first. Right, and we are in this kind of educational system. It's like you have to do good art, which is like judged by others, and in that way, then your art is like starting to get distance from you, and it doesn't really becomes meaningful. And it still matters how you produce like good art, like if you want to, right? And then I think it's very important still to give us, because I also teach, so it's very important to more like, you can't believe how difficult it is as a master, like teacher in the master education, they're trying to convince the student that it's okay, you can create art that you care. It's more about like, for them, it's more about how do I create arts that can hang in the gallery? Right? And so I think how to switch that notion, then you will actually be less burned out. Because on the act of doing your art, you already nurtured. And that's the most important thing, because you can't control the market, you can't control who will see your work, you can't control which curator will actually notice you, but what you can control is that you are doing the meaningful work for yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And also do it if you are going to end up in the art history books or whatever or not, or if somebody already calls it art or maybe only in 30 years. And I think what we could profit from here in the center, yeah, we're very close to the market. Amsterdam is a place where art is an excellent means of money laundering and things like that. It's really amazing. But if we could learn from places that are not so close to the market, I think that would be quite inspiring. And you're presenting certain ideas like that close to my heart. I was born in East Germany. And I worked in Belfast in Northern Ireland, or places like that. Yeah, if an authoritarian government tells you that you are the kind of artist who must not show in official spaces, what do? You educate your children, you sing songs, you walk in the woods, do all the things that you do in your life as an artist still. and certain stuff might come out of that. You might create an archive. You might not want to create incriminating evidence, but maybe you keep it under the mattress, and then a couple of decades later, somebody comes and says, this was valuable. I'll even show it. I'll write about it. And in Northern Ireland, there was not much money for art, but maybe money for initiatives, cross-community, peace monies, EU monies, things like that. So a performance artist, friend of mine called Rainer Pagel, ended up really being very professional, the opposite of scrappy, working out how to organize and reorganize, institute with EU, with peace monies, and make cross-community initiatives for able-bodied and other people for a couple of decades. And then after, 30 years, he returned to his performance art practice. Voila, yeah, that kind of thing. And that nurtures, and that has something to do with each other. I'm not just saying that this happens on the lefty side of the political spectrum. People who organize and do things through an understanding of art and art history can also do things that are quite damaging. On the other side, in Trump's first Security Council, there was an art historian, right? So my profession isn't all good, but there are people who look at things as an overarching reality that includes infrastructures and people and not just things hanging on nails.
Can I also make a last comment? I would also say I totally agree with everything you said. We need to, go slower, take care of ourselves, do what we feel is important, but also if we find that little niche where we can safely do what we want to do with our community, let's not forget to keep that anger that we had to break the museum down, right? Let's not forget to politicize, join the union, call out the museum who doesn't want to pay you, go to the barricades, right? Because this is how we're strong together. Let's take care of ourselves and politicize.
I'm sorry. I want to say that all that we've said here doesn't, and in the practical sense, and when you're working as a person who is in the art sector, it always comes with sacrifice. And it is, it unfortunately, which I think is really the sad part, it comes with sacrifice, whether it be on your part or people in your lives who are supporting you or helping you. And what I mean by that is, this is not a sector that is going to be easy on you. It's true. It's unfortunate. You are going to put in a lot of work to be able to be an artist, to be able to be a producer, to be able to be a professor, to be able to be a researcher in the sector. There is sacrifice in it. It isn't one of ease almost. And so when we're talking about resilience and we're also talking about healing, it's recognizing that. And also, like with a full disclaimer on my part, I can be in this sector because I have the support, like I have financial support, and it allows me to explore this. But I know that there's a huge percentage of people who want to be in this sector and who can't because they can't afford it. That's one of the reasons why I appreciate what I do at USCOM, and I keep bringing it back because I think that USCOM, or this other creative, like this other collective that's called the New Curators in London, is these initiatives that pay young people who want to learn about the field of museology or the creative field, and do so in a way that it's like a livable wage. But those are just so few to come by. It's not the norm. So when I say that there's sacrifice, it's you might work in the art sector and have to work 2-3 jobs. You work in the art sector and you might not see, you might not be able to see the financial benefits for a very long time. But I always think that it's important to stay true to yourself and know that, is this where you want to be? Is this what you want to do? Then you put in the work to do so.
Sorry. We should open the floor, but I guess, yeah. But just to talk about sacrifice, I think also, it's important to like picking up on what you said is like the whole economy has been accustomed to unpaid internship and like it relying on your sacrifice, and that's a reality. And so when the reality cannot be fully shifted, my suggestion will be pick the sacrifice that you think is worth it. That the sacrifice that do give you something non-monetary but meaningful to you back. And then at the same time calling out institution, while at the same time it's important to recognize in an unethical institution there are ethical people, that they try to do something different. And then that's the kind of people that you want to make friends with, because when the shift has changed, when the tide has shifted, then you want to snap onto these friends and make the change that you want to implement in the future, or you want to influence, right? So, yeah, that's all.
Wow, thank you, everyone. No, I think it was very. Oh, is it? Yeah, it was super interesting. But I think indeed it's time for questions from the audience.
Hello. Okay. First of all, thank you so much. It was really insightful. It really resonated with me. I had a question about your stance on AI-generated art. I know a lot of people that are artists and they're completely against it. They see it as a threat to their livelihood. But on the other side, I've also seen people say it is something that democratizing the making of art. So yeah, I was wondering where that stands in the discussion.
Am I talking too much? No, go ahead. Yeah, so I think this question has at least two layers. One thing is on the livelihood things. Like, I don't particularly think that people are against AI generative art per se, but the profiting model behind it and the whole kind of like corporate kind of power and the ongoing dehumanization of like labor in art included, right? And that's a independent fight, I was trying to argue. However, on the other hand, if we're only talking about art per se, I try to preach the idea that art is not just the object, exhibition, is not the visual, but really is a pathway where we get to imagine the way that we live, the way that we, in this world, like our relationship with the world can become different. And if we consider that as art at large, AI almost is just something in the pathway. Doesn't really like you can like, oh, this AI little digital buddy, like how can I have a conversation with you or collaboration with you so that I can understand the world differently? Or other people can understand the world differently. That still is art, right? Like we make art through different kind of supports and mediums and human, non-human, whatsoever. Why would AI be different? But what we should really pick in the fight is the corporate model behind it. And like how do we, we need to still fight our seat on the table to talk about like, if you want to democratize it, why aren't the profit being democratized? Right? Why aren't the ownership being democratized? If you're talking about democracy, why is my art being put into your training model and without my consent, without profit returned to me? That's the fight that we need to pick and not the tool itself, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Is there still another question from the audience?
How do you feel about using social media to sell the arts? Because I know that many industries has, I would say, democratized, like give more power to creators in more commercial industry like design or people who provide different services. So for example, even psychologists on TikTok that attract a lot of people. So I wonder if there is the space for improvement. You mentioned the war with the museums and institutions. So how do you feel about using the commercial part of capitalism to give more power to the artists?
Well, it's kind of interesting that you asked that question because a lot of the time artists in the institution I work in, we actually find them on Instagram. We find them on social media. And it's because when it comes to like finding them, and it also comes to like having their stories out there, it's almost so simple to snap a picture and then it's like, oh, this is what I created, you know what I mean? But unfortunately, the way that social media is shifting and the way that it's changing now, it doesn't have I almost want to say it doesn't have the naive aspect of it, that idea that you're just sharing an image. It's become a lot more political. There's a lot more perspectives. There's a lot more going on these platforms. And so for you to just showcase your work, it's always going to be in conversation with what's going on that platform. A part of me wants to say that use them because I think that it's important for people to find you, people to find what you're doing and how you do it. And in the age of technology and online, I think that it's, in terms of accessibility, it's very accessible. But another part of me is very critical of it because it is essentially like falling at the seams, and it's allowing for misinformation, hatred, exploitation of different kinds to take place. And so, yeah, I think that there is this conversation about maybe there's always these things about like moving from one platform to the next, but you even spoke about it. It's like almost replicating those exact platforms. I don't know. You wanted to say something?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I could ask you that, and I agree. Like a lot of the time, these kind of seemingly disruptive movements are actually reproductive in many ways. And I think here the same goes that Ivan just said about the platforms and their ownerships, right? I mean, yeah, social media are profit generators for the people in Silicon Valley. Anyway, I mean, I find it very interesting to see that many people are using social media as a medium, or, you know, do TikToks and find interesting ways to make that into their art. But if it comes to really selling your art or emancipating from the market, I wouldn't be so naive there. Just to mention one short example is the NFT boom, right? In which it was the promise that anyone can make art, anyone can make an NFT, anyone can sell it on these big NFT platforms. What we actually know is that the real sales happened through networks on mainly Twitter, right? So it was people that were already in networks where there was already money and already cultural kind of capital going around, and that then translated into NFT sales and resale. So a lot of the times, if we go a little bit deeper, we see that these structures are maybe extending or refreshing or rejuvenating the systems that are already in place and that create inequalities.
I will add again. Like I would provide like also like two-layer kind of analysis. One thing is that I do think the disruption that you mentioned is, of course, a confrontation of how a museum and gallery model is essentially a monopolizing model, right? It takes on like the whole value chain machine, and how does like artists like generating like valued by all sorts of like market kind of. I don't want to extend on that. If you want, I can. But social media does like horizontalize that, right? And then it really makes the kind of value change much shorter. And of course, as a consequence, it also you become less valuable. So the spoiler alert, like in the art chain of value, is like the longer your chain is, the more valuable you are. So in that sense, I think that's where social media being revolutionizing, like, or at least providing a window for confrontational moment for museum. However, what is not quite revolutionized is that whatever a social media platform can provide you is not more than spectatorship, if not less, because it's two-dimensional, right? So does it really provide you a better place to sell your art if your art does matter to you, right? So I think like that goes back to the individual artists. Is like, yes, it's great if there are sort of like digital artists that finally find a platform to sell the art that is appropriate to their own environment. That's great. But what about other artists that sort of like need to take a different forms of art? So that space doesn't necessarily revolutionize on that level. Yeah, so that would be mine.
Sorry. I didn't want to ask something, I just wanted to comment on what you're saying, because the question was about selling the work. It was quite direct. It was about democratizing through sales. And one of the issues that we didn't touch here is that one of the things that makes art so appetizing to all of us is its uniqueness, and it's the mystic around it. When you are putting work for sale in social media, you are actually lowering its social capital. You're lowering the attraction that you need to have for an art market. And I say market, not the commercial side of the market, but in general, you're lowering the attractiveness that work will have for the ecosystem of the art. And not just for the sales, but then also for the art historians that might want to write about that work, for the museums that might want to include that work in their collections, that will feed then into the art historians that will research it and write about the collections, both and the movements that can come out of it. And also one other detail is that, as I'm an art historian, just to say that I'm coming from that side of the film, the poor side of the film. We also have to consider that we like to demonize the structures that play, the ones that exist, that have existed for centuries now. But those are the structures that you should actually take advantage of. A gallery is not there to take 50% of your money. A gallery is there to help you to produce the works you want to produce. They are there to extend your network to a point that you alone, even because you need to be producing work, are not going to be able to reach. They are the ones that will almost for sure invite the curators to go to your studios or have the contacts in different countries that will bring people around. You know, they're the ones that will organize most times for your residencies in the art capitals of the world. It's not going to be you. It's going to be them doing that. Or a museum, you know. You get a good curator, even a young curator, in a local, municipal museum that likes your work, and you can be sure that you're going to get more shows out of that you're going to get from trying to, you yourself, push your work with portfolios to galleries and to whoever comes around. So social media, great as a portfolio. Careful where you show it because there's image associations. But, to sell, and again, the digital boom with the NFTs, that's great for crypto guys. But ask most of the people that are within the art world, and they will tell you that most of what was produced with an NFT is not really something that's going to stay. It's a lot of it is considered illustration, or there's a lot of miscommunication about it as well. Most people don't understand the NFT is not the work itself; it's the contract that comes with the work, and for that you can do it to any of the more conservative forms of production as well. So anyway, sorry.
Hi, thank you very much for this discussion. I've really enjoyed all of the things that you said and all the things I've heard. Just to sort of comment really, maybe just a short comment on the connection between the first two questions. So the first one was on generative AI and the way in which images can now be produced artificially. And the second one was on social media. And of course, those two things are very much connected, and we've been in this social media space for a lot longer. But of course, the images that social media provides, the models that are now able to create images from scratch artificially, I mean, those share a common ancestor because they are together. So the images are documented through our own narcissism, whether it's taking selfies or taking pictures of the art we produce. And then they're fed back to us, of course, and the copyright and the ownership is taken away when generative AI creates these things. And there's a sort of sad irony that those two things are actually very much complicit. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Frank Evelijn. I'm married for decades to a sculptor, a woman, and I've been involved in Sculpture Network, which is a European connective platform for 3D artists. I'm quite bothered by the male construct in society that seems to be still widespread and creates the sort of economic statistics that you just mentioned, Sepp. And small anecdotes like the wife of Rudy Fuchs, who forbade him to eat with women. Therefore, we never saw a woman in the Stedelijk Museum. And I mean, there are deranged and twisted mechanisms that we can't seem to get over the tipping point. And I'd like to ask you about the influence of what I still see is the male construct in society and how to get over it.
I don't think we need to get over it. It just need other types of body having more space, talking more, and just we'll make like. I think even the idea of like how do we take down patriarchy is too much credit for the male. Like I would say that like just create something beyond that, right? Like because we don't actually know how a non-patriarchy society will look like. So to talk about let's break it down, it's just like let's burn the museum. But what else do we actually want? And I think it's more important to put in the action, give the space to the body that wasn't represented before, and then do the work that wasn't done before. Talk about things that hasn't been really talked about before. And then when we taking more space, then the overall space is going to change. So men, please just be yourself and don't worry about the world, and then the world will be made by other people too. So that's my take.
In the contemporary art world, or here at the university, we have usually 90% female art history students, and we have about a few years ago, this was completely black and white. Now this is no longer like that anymore. But all the art specialisms that are valuable, older, golden age, medieval, architectural, whatever, they were all male professors, and contemporary, modern and contemporary, all female, and usually foreign to be able to do all the work. And cross-subsidize the rest where there isn't that much student interest and so on and so forth. So now with the cuts, we're seeing that art institutions are also more endangered that are not the Rijksmuseum, that are not following and sort of breeding the canon, but more critical, more contemporary. So these kinds of self-perpetuating value judgments and how they're instituted. If you can tell me how to change that, I'd rather like to do it.
Maybe, I mean, there are maybe way too small but very concrete things we can do, right? We can have residencies be available to families or mothers with kids, for instance.
Absolutely.
This is a kind of very, very small thing. We can make sure that in art schools teachers sign codes of conduct, that because the insecurity that we're facing affects some bodies more than others, obviously, especially ones with dependent bodies. So we can, to some extent, have these conversations protocolized. We went through a little bit of a Me Too moment in the Dutch arts as well, but we can do way more than that. So we can start in the arts as well, I think.
Yeah, thanks.
I wanted, is there still time? One more? All right, I'll try and keep it short. Thanks for all the guests. Also, I wanted to return a little bit to what we began with, which was the dichotomy between sort of art historic, academic education and art practical education. Both are around the notion of artistic thinking. And it sort of got me thinking also to the title and the idea of the art world. I want to thank everybody on stage for getting it out of the idea of there being a singular art world, and that there are, if anything, art worlds, and that's actually a little bit problematic, and this is what my question is. Could we maybe ask also what the role that the education system itself plays in this? Now it's called a bachelor's degree. Before it was a HBO, and B was for beroep, or in other words, occupation. I'm quite curious if we consider there are 11 academies in the Netherlands, which on average a year results in about 800 graduates, who all could go on to masters and PhDs, but there are 800 people who are trained in artistic practice and artistic thinking. That's a very specialistic and very specific sort of expertise. Is there something that we could do also in that education system that would impact this idea of the art world being more than just the art world or the art worlds, and what could that look like?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I think we're trying to do that. We have an artistic research masters, and we have a number of PhD candidates who work as artists, investigating, contextualizing, theorizing the questions that their art is asking. So the people who come from academies and are missing certain theoretical and more in-depth questions, they can come to us, but it's very small. It's it's probably too small to make a really big dent in the public perception of how art can be a kind of an analytical and world changing practice or something like that. But maybe if somebody were to give us more resources, we could take more. And those people who are studying with us, it's really such a rewarding thing to do this. It's really amazing what these people do in their research master projects or their PhDs. And I get a total blast out of it, and I hope that it kind of lands in society as well. If we can only do one person at a time, as in I can.
Also a teacher myself, I really resonate with the question. I do think like one person at a time is very much quite the answer, but I can expand on it a little bit in terms of, I think, like for instance, I mentioned like how do you actually help students to change the idea from like I must make art for the market, I must make art for the highly specialized, professionalized art world. Instead, like trying to believe the idea that if you make something meaningful for yourself, and then eventually the world around you is starting to change for you. And then you're going to make communities, you're going to make friends. And a lot of teaching that I have is more about like, how do you open up? How do you make your vulnerability accessible for other people? How do you make friends in the art circle and outside of the art circle? How do you make your art that is more than just about like talking about your own kind of like image, but rather like it's about something broader? And all these little things I believe that will kind of create a very kind of slow but a change that will be more sustainable, because these are the people eventually will go into the art world, become part of the art world, and then their way of thinking and doing gonna influence the art world around them, which then I very much agree with you. There's not a singular art world, but a very small kind of different kind of ecosystem around, to the scale of like all our little community that you mentioned around us in the practitioners, to the bigger ones, the nation state, to like the Netherlands. Every city is its own ecology. But on the other hand, we should not overlook that since the 90s, where the art market become globalized and through different kind of biennales, and then that also kind of create the foundation where the art world becomes really like it's a exchange of information within its own kind of like logic. So that's where we are facing the crisis now, is that local population no longer believe the art is really working for them or speaking with them, but rather very much interested in flying in different artists and different scholars to just talk about in their own language. And that has to do with, like, since the 90s, how neoliberalism co-opted the art world into a globalizing trend. And again, then the change has to happen, I do think, on an individual level. How do we engage with art, our own art, and differently? And that is what education can offer.
Last thing, I promise. You talked about how you wanted, I mean, not you wanted, but the conversation that we were having was almost like bridging the gap between the academic aspect of the art sector and then that of the, like, the reality, almost, if I understood. Yeah? To be very honest with you, I think that one side of the bridge is slightly inaccessible. Now, I know there's some people who are going to disagree with me on that, and they might actually think that it's the art sector part, but I do think that academia can sometimes be inaccessible. And I think that it is first, it could be cost, but also in terms of the language that's used, the theoretical that's used. When I went to university, I appreciated highly the things that I learned, right? But then when it came to, like, the practical side of it, like actually being in the sector and actually working, I came to realize that a lot of the things that I had learned in university weren't used or, like, actually something that was appreciated or was needed in the spaces. What was needed were the skills, like the fact that I was able to be present, hands-on, a quick learner. I think that the two are continuously in conversation. But when I say that what I mean by academia not being accessible, I sometimes feel like it's just a circle of people having a conversation amongst themselves, and then the reality and the real world that's happening outside is left out, basically. It feels like academia is just kind of looking outside on the world, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. Let's talk about it amongst ourselves. Let's have this conversation, which I mean, that could just be a reality of what it is, you know? But I think that if you want to then bridge the gap, it means opening up your circle and having a genuine conversation with people who are not just, like, on the same level as you. So it's not people who are, like, academics, people who are, like, or artists who have gone to, like, schools, or curators who have gone to big universities or academies, or practitioners who are in these academic spaces. I think it's having those genuine conversations and having them participate in them in order for that bridge to be not only gapped, but so that it's sustainable, you know? I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this answer. I think, yeah, that's a really good point, and I would also love to hear your take on it, but maybe we can discuss it later during the drinks as well. Because now I would really like to invite Nadine van den Bos on the stage. She will give us a masterclass, and she's the director and co-founder of Young Collectors Circle. This is a non-profit and community-based platform dedicated to supporting the arts through facilitating connections between artists, art lovers, and potential collectors. And she also works as a curator and has written books and columns and everything on the subject. So I would like to invite her to come forward, and I would really like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you. I think I can speak for the both of us if I say that I'm really grateful for all your perspectives and answers, and also the questions from the audience. So yeah, thank you for this, and welcome Nadine, please.
Wow, well, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to stand over here a little bit so I can see the presentation and I can see all of you guys. Thank you so much, Zana, for the introduction, and also thank all of you panelists for such an inspiring exchange of thoughts, and thank all of you for being here tonight on this this Wednesday evening. My name is Nadine. I'm the director of Young Collectors Circle, and Zana already introduced a bit what we do. I will get to that point a bit later on. I have been given like 10 minutes, so it's not going to be like a masterclass, but more of like an introduction and some personal stories of mine that I encountered when I also first entered the art world, because I also studied at the University of Amsterdam. I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, don't worry. But I studied here at the University of Amsterdam. Let's see, where should I point the clicker to? Oh, yeah, okay, great. And I actually did my master thesis on the practice of Jonas Staal, who's an artist who you might know. He was exhibiting at the Stedelijk Museum in 2023, recently part of the Prix de Rome exhibition. He was nominated for this very prestigious art prize, which I also find quite funny, because when I was doing an internship with him for my master thesis, I was working on the New World Summit in Leiden. You can see the image above. And this was part of his work when he was creative alternative structures for distributing power. So he's creating an alternative parliament. And I thought it was interesting to see him, 10 years later, being awarded a prize that is very much rooted into the institutions that he's trying to abolish. So I think it's very interesting that as an artist, you can at the same time try to change a system, but also be a part of it and use the power that you've been given to maybe not abolish, but to change the structures that you're fighting against. So from the New World Summit to the Prix de Rome. In the meantime, when I was wrapping up my studies, I also thought about where do I want to be in the art world as a recent graduate? How do I find my way? Because as also being said today, at the university you learn a lot about theory, it's about academia, but where do you stand as a recent graduate? Because after all, we have to also make a living. So where do you start? And there are quite a few thresholds that you will encounter, most probably, whether you are a soon-to-be art professional or someone who really has a passion for the arts and likes to be a part of this world but doesn't really know how to find their way yet. You might come across some, maybe a bit confusing artworks, and when you turn to the exhibition text, it might have a lot of art lingo, some like text that you think, well, this doesn't really help me out either, like a bit of curatorial mumbo-jumbo. And when you decide to turn to the galleries, this is an image that you might come across, like a very hermetic way, like the art world doesn't really have the a feeling of being welcomed. There's still this very much like a closed bastion where it's quite difficult to become a part of. So this is something that you might encounter. There's also the notion that art world is only about money. Every time you open up the paper and there's a news article about the art world, it's always about some auction record being broken or a theft, or it's always about the monetary value of the art world. Oh, whoa. So, time to hit the bar? No, sorry. I think something went wrong. About being unwelcoming, this was not trying to get you out. So there are quite a lot of thresholds that you might encounter, and the idea of that this art world is only for the happy few, for the elite who have like a lot of money and a lot of power. I think it's really time that we change this idea of who can really shape the art world and be a part of this. So I'm just going to continue the story, and you have to imagine like all the nice images that I created for you. I was also thinking like these are things that we encounter, like barriers or thresholds that are quite that you experience on an individual level. But there are also things that are also part of the conversation here earlier this evening that are more structural, things that you encounter that are really rooted also in the institutions. And that might be maybe a bit more difficult to pinpoint or to put your finger on, but that are definitely there, and that are also like part of a bigger problem. I actually selected like a really funny memes for you. So now my story is going to be maybe a bit boring, but you'll have to envision them in your head. So there are quite a lot of these problems that are very structural that we have identified, and I think that is the first part. And maybe we've also thought that we have come up with a few solutions, such as codes of conduct. But I also find that these solutions that we have proposed as an art world sometimes are just merely band-aids. So I also think we have to be like really critical of how does the solution that we create, how does it really help us to make sure that there's room for change. So, for instance, the very bad financial structure for artists and people who work in the art sector, a lot of precariousness about contracts, about funding. So it is also something that is that can be really it's really difficult sometimes to try to make a living, because you think it's very important what you do. You think it's really something that you want to really put your mind to. But at the same time, it can be really difficult when your situation is so unsure. Just gonna go back to where we should be. Okay, so I'm afraid to use the clicker. Yeah, so this is a precarious economic situation that we encounter. Working 2 or 3 jobs, we all getting used to this idea, but I think we should really try to make sure that our foundation is a bit more safe. We have the Fair Practice Code, Gallery Fair Practice Code. Of course, I think it's a good first step, but we need to work on that as well. I have seen so many exhibitions about climate change over the last few years. A lot of artists who are reflecting on this topic, but at the same time, we all travel to Venice for the biennial. We all have like these different art fairs, and do we really need Frieze London and Frieze New York and Frieze LA? I personally don't think so, but I think it's very good to also look into the mirror and see and reflect on our own behavior. A few solutions that we've come up with. Again, maybe a good first start, but not nearly enough. Abuse of power dynamics within the art world. I think it's just as any sector, there's quite a lot to gain for institutions still, but also for collectors. Of course, we have also the responsibility to, when they interact with galleries or with artists, to do this in an ethical manner. So, for instance, there's the ethics of collecting, Code of Conduct for Contemporary Art Collectors. Again, a good start, and also the Code of Cultural Governance, of course. Diversity and inclusion, I think we've all think this is a very hot topic right now, especially since the executive order of the new president of the United States last week, who will abolish all the small steps that we have taken forward. And it seems like it's not. It doesn't look very bright on that side of the ocean. But I think also, again, here in the Netherlands, we have the code diversity and inclusion. But we really have to make sure that we strive for structural changes, and not only just doing it in a small way. But we really have to do it on a structural level. So I think we really have to change the way that we work and that we operate. I think that's the only way. I think we all need to do it together, because that's the only way to make a difference. So after this maybe a bit demotivating speech about everything that is wrong with the art world, there is also, I think, if we want to make it better together, then this is definitely possible, because all of these things are also things that I encountered as a recent graduate and still do throughout my work in the art world. So when we started Young Collectors Circle, we thought, well, who is there to guide people into the art world, to show them around and to see how the art world works? Who really just like easy answers to easy questions, like who is who, where do you go, where can you discover new artists, where you can meet people who also are interested in art. And we thought, well, there really isn't a place for this yet. So together with my business partner, I decided to found a Young Collectors Circle. We have a non-profit organization, so we really all the things that go into Young Collectors Circle, we put them back into the art world. So we really try to support the art world with our platform. We thought a good way to do it is not only to to talk about art, but to really to try to inspire a new generation of people to start collecting art, and by collecting art, putting their money where their mouth is and supporting artists. So with Young Collectors Circle, we try to help you to find your own spot in the art world. And we organize a lot of different events to make you feel a bit comfortable and a bit welcome as well. So a lot of people ask me, like, when I say, well, Young Collectors Circle, a lot of questions that come up are about when are you a collector, and if you are interested in buying art, when you buy a work of art, are you immediately a collector or not? Well, we loosely use these terms, so anyone who joins our platform, you don't necessarily have to already buy a work of art. You can also be someone who is just curious to learn more about the inner workings. I always say that it's the best way to surround yourself with things that you find interesting, with new perspective, with new artworks, is to collect art. And we want to show that collecting art really is for everyone, for each budget, for each interest. And I think it's the best way to collect art is to collect contemporary art, because then you immediately support the artist. If you buy a work from a living artist, someone who is from your generation, your peers, then you directly contribute to their career. Not only do you support them financially, but you also help to shape the future of the art world. Not only do museum directors or curators or writers or academia shape the art world, I think as a private collector you can also be a part of that. So if you buy a work from an artist whose ideas you find important, whose voice you want to amplify, then you're also part of creating the art world of the future. Reflecting on current affairs, I think it's important if you purchase a work from an artist, whose ideas you find interesting and whose thoughts you want to put on the forefront. Then I think it's the most interesting to buy art from your peers, for contemporary artists, and of course, work from contemporary artists is a lot more affordable for everyone because they are not already on the top end of the market, and that does not mean that you get a good bargain, but it means that you should buy more. So instead of buying one work, you can buy two. So that's always my advice that I would like to give. To give you a bit of an insight of how we work, I put a video on this. I don't know if I'm going to jinx it right now when I'm trying to play it. Yeah? Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, we manifest for the video to play. I'm gonna just spoil what's inside it. Okay, good. So what do? We visit a lot of artist studios, so for you to get a bit of an idea of how artists operate and get a bit of an idea into their working process. We visit a lot of exhibitions and art fairs where you get to meet artists, gallerists, and try to also understand the relationships between these different players in the art world. We introduce you to other people who are interested in art, so you can exchange experiences. We also host a lot of masterclasses and panel discussions, both online and offline. And just like everyone else in the world, we also have our own podcast where we interview a lot of artists to learn more about their artistic practices. So, I think that sums it up quite a bit. If you're interested to learn more, of course, you're more than welcome to join our platform. Before Trump is going to play, I think we should close down the video. But I really want to thank all of you for being here tonight, and would love to continue the conversation with a drink. Thank you.
Okay, this was the end of the panel. I would like to wish everyone still a happy Lunar New Year, and it's time for the free drinks. Yes.